Yeah. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Worship and Word Conversations. And I'm here with Chris Bartley. Chris, you probably got to do most of the talking this week because, I got no lights.
A lot of
I don't
transitions.
have a microphone. I'm not sitting in my studio with the high table. We're literally on the road doing the best with what we have. So, yeah, man.
Hey, man, that's the beauty of ministry. That's the beauty of mobility. Hey, you know what I think about? I think about the Old Testament tabernacle. It was designed for this very thing.
To pick it up and go.
Pick it up, go put it down, worship. Like this.
Yeah.
So you in the right, you tabernacling.
You true. Pick it up, put it down. So listen, last night I was watching from the car. Last night on the way to New Jersey, we're hanging out in New Jersey, and man, I almost ran off the road a couple times. I wanted to throw my head up and my hands back and shout, but I couldn't throw my hands up and drive. So I could do one hand, but probably not both of them. So yeah. Listen, man, it's a lot going on over here, man. We're in the middle of a birthday celebration for my sister-in-law. I don't know if you hear people singing happy birthday in the background.
Now, I don't know if you get my nephew in the background, so
we all are here together. So I'm excited to continue this conversation, man. From last week, we were talking about guarding the seeds, and of course, if you were not with us last night, listen. And I was just in the audience, a regular old Worship and Word family member, soaking it up like the rest of you. And as Carlos was saying, missed you, Pierre, last night. But you see that but? See, here's the thing. When you say but, it negates everything before, right?
Dang, Carlos, he set me up. Oh, man.
Your boy was on fire. Yes, he was on fire last night. And I'm contemplating retirement because, hey, Chris and Miguel got it. So
let me tell y'all, let me tell y'all something before he does what he's about to do. So this is part of Pastor Quinn's MO. He be setting up
you said Pastor. Oh, you do that on there. Normally you say Pierre, but okay.
He be setting up stuff for it to end up being bigger than he had anticipated, and then he bows out. You ain't bowing out on this one. Nope. Nope. You ball and chain to this co-host. You ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, so Auntie Monica says happy birthday. It's not my birthday. It's my sister-in-law Carolyn's. It's her birthday. So they're doing the whole cake and homemade ice cream joint. I'll join them. I'll join them as soon as we're done hanging out here. Gerald says Miguel hit it out. Yeah, he hit it out. It was grand slam in the conversation last night. Listen, y'all. If you were with us, if you were hanging out with us last night, I know Chris was hosting. Miguel, who's part of our Worship and Word family, shared a devotional last night. Hop in the comment section. Let us know what parts of last night, like the part that resonate, that you remember, that you told somebody about, that you wrote down in your prayer journal. Drop that in the comment section. I'm going to play a clip from last night, but before I play my clip, I want to hear what everybody else had to say about last night's session. And then after that, Chris, we're going to get to part 2 of our discussion on the book Boundaries, Guarding the Seeds. Part 2, I know, is going to be a heavy discussion because last week, man,
we only got through 3, 4 of them.
We went to 5. We got to 5.
Okay.
Yeah. We finished off with the law of motivation. So we got to do our check-ins. Aaron is in the building. Aaron in the squad. We already heard from Gerald. Pam is with us. We know Carlos is hanging out with us. Auntie Monica is here. Carmilla from Bermuda is hanging out with us again. So yeah, as you're coming in, say what's up in the comment section. We'd love to give you a shout out. And we also, if you were hanging out with us last night, drop in the comment section a part that you almost threw your phone last night, or you almost flipped the computer over, or you almost ripped the TV off the wall because you were casting it to the TV as you were listening last night. All right. So yeah, man.
Hey, let me tell you. Let me quick testimony. So
yeah, do it.
So I was going through the doing this executive storytelling challenge called the Samson Challenge this week, right? In a space now where I'm feeling so comfortable being able to take my belief system and undergird it on top of business structure. So now when people are like, why is it called the Samson Challenge? Well, sit down and let me tell you a story. Like, oh, I love it, right? So, man, great space. But we had an internet outage. I think it was on Thursday. It was a rough day. And then on top of that, I'm, trying to get it in, and then the internet goes out. I'm like, oh, come on. Yeah. So the internet goes out, but the new internet comes in. And we got like double the amount of uploading speed. So yesterday, praise God, went without a hitch with internet. You remember I've been having internet issues for a minute now too, like just the choppiness. Yeah. Producing is different. It does take more bandwidth and all of that. So I just praise God the fact that the outage, the famine, presented an opportunity to restore something greater for what happened yesterday. Listen, I was upset about the famine, but I ain't upset about the results though. So
listen, that's what Carlos was saying last night. For him, the famine was the blessing that restored the family. Pam resonates with that as well. Nothing would have happened without the famine. Donna says the famine that brought Joseph's family back together. God used the situation to reconcile. Man, I know it had a lot of us sort of rethinking these famine moments, famine experiences in our lives. And how we can just reframe those experiences and look to where God is directing us. Renita's checking in with us. He says, hello, Worship and Word family. Aaron says, what stood out for me last night was how intentional God was with Joseph and his brothers. I knew the story, but there were little nuances that were pointed out last night that blew me away. And I love that because a lot of times when we hear, here's the thing about preaching, even preparing Bible stories, there's not enough time to communicate everything that we study. There's just not enough time to share with you everything that we studied. So there are times when you've heard, your best preachers, or even when you read the scripture yourself, there is so much packed into one verse or one story that, man, it's just not enough time to unpack it all. So when you hear a nuance that you haven't heard before, it's like, wow, it's always been there. I've just never seen it before. So you want to take Gerald's?
Yeah, so Gerald is saying without the famine, Joseph couldn't have been elevated in the famine. The ones prospering was Joseph's fam and Pharaoh. There's the theme. Now, mind you, I was just, my brief testimony, the Wi-Fi testimony, that was cool. But I love the theme here is that the famine is connected to relationships.
Oh,
it wasn't about the produce. It wasn't about the land, the property. It wasn't about, because those things also happened. And when he was Miguel was talking about how eventually Pharaoh ended up owning everything in the exchange. It wasn't about those things, though. It wasn't about the material things. God used it for the reconciliation. Somebody used the word reconciliation. I think it was Aaron. Reconciliation for family. That's what's important.
Yes. Listen, I know we're going to talk about Guarding the Seeds Part 2, and we're looking at the 10 Laws of Boundaries from the book Boundaries by Townsend and Cloud. But before we jump into that, man, I just want to play that specific part of the message last night. I just want to play that part. It's about 3 minutes, and we'll still be on the screen as it's being played. So there are people who you just stopping to scroll, or maybe you only hang out with us on Saturday afternoons, on Sabbath afternoons, because of your schedule and prior commitments. So sometimes you don't get the Bible study we do on Friday night. So this will be a first for you. If you were with us on last night, you're probably going to say, yeah, that was the part that really stuck out for me too. So we're going to play a clip of this. It's about 2 to 3 minutes, and then we'll shift and go into part 2 of Guarding the Seed. So here it is.
Is this your time? Run it back. Oh, wow.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Joseph's family is experiencing the famine that Pharaoh had a dream from God, and Joseph was able to interpret. Therefore, had it not been for the famine, Pharaoh would have no need for Joseph. So the pain that his family was experiencing The discomfort that his family was experiencing was also putting Joseph in the necessary spots to provide aid and to provide resources for them to come.
Wow.
Yeah. Let's you know, I don't know how deep we want to talk about this, but a lot of us have struggles within our marriages, within our family.
Yeah.
And the struggle happens oftentimes when you see a vision from God that conflicts with what your family has planned for you. And there is a sense of resentment that exists. And I don't know if this is for everybody. I don't know who I'm speaking to, but there's a sense of resentment to your family that they didn't embrace the vision that God had for you. They didn't embrace your gifts. They didn't embrace your career like they should have. But the reality is God is putting you in a position. God is allowing you to have resources to help that same family. Yeah, what we're experiencing here in this pandemic, let me just help somebody out. What we're experiencing is church doors open, but the church is wide open. Yeah, we're preaching the gospel 24/7. No longer are we in our country club churches. We are preaching the gospel to the world. And a lot of us are uncomfortable because we can't sit in our favorite spots. We can't listen to our favorite praise teams. We are uncomfortable with this reality. But the truth is, there are people that I'm witnessing are taking advantage of this same pandemic because the gifts that God had for them could not be utilized in the church. And so they've been spending years preparing for this very moment. So while the rest of us are uncomfortable, they are thriving.
Yeah, so if you listen, if you want to get the rest of that, you were not with us hanging out last night. You gotta go to the previous. If you're watching this on Facebook, if you're watching this on YouTube, you gotta go to the previous recording of this, even if you're watching the replay of this, to catch the full message in its entirety. So
yeah.
Woo.
It's just there's just so much in that. Oh,
it's so much in that piece, man. It's so much in that piece. But again, this is worship and word conversation. So we're gonna do the rest of the 10 laws of boundaries. But I want to encourage you to go back and listen to When You Didn't See It Coming. Go back and listen to that. Catch it on YouTube or catch it on our Facebook page that you're watching right now. All right, so Chris, man, 10 laws of boundary. 10 laws of boundaries. And that coincides actually with this conversation too, as well. When you think about the proximity even of Joseph and his family, and when they moved to Canaan, and then him still retaining his position and his livelihood, that boundary was still in place, even though his family came, geographically much closer to him, but he did not abandon his responsibilities. That boundary of his responsibilities for Egypt were still up in the midst of him taking care of his family. So yeah, man.
So are we just gonna jump into number 6?
No, let's do a quick 1 through 5 real recap. Quick, man.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. Good stuff. All quick right.
Recap. We're reading Boundaries by Townsend. I did it again. Townsend and Cloud. This is the book, Boundaries by Townsend and Cloud. So I want to encourage everyone to get a copy of this book. It's a fantastic book. Many of our Worship and Word family have already read the book and have been helping us with this discussion. But if you have not read it, get it. When to say yes, how to say no, to take control of your life. So, Chris, you want to guide us through these 5 real quick?
Without commentary, yeah. Okay. Because man, I'm thinking about somebody who's like, oh man, let me just go ahead and. So number 1 is the law of sowing and reaping. Number 2 is the law of responsibility. Number 3 is the law of power. I think that is the one that resonated most with me this week. Number 4 is the law of respect, and number 5 is the law of motivation. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, those 5 we covered last week. We spent over an hour going over these 5 laws that I believe it's in chapter 3 or chapter 4 of boundaries. And we want to get you with 6 through 10 of these laws. And man, it starts off, man, just continuing that conversation. It continues like with a doozy. So law number 6 is the law of evaluation. And when I was reading through this particular law in the workbook and also in the book itself, it said in the law of evaluation, you have to make the distinction between what hurting someone is and what harming someone is. So when we reinforce our boundaries, when we tell a person no, it has the potential to hurt them. So if I say, hey, Chris, I'm doing an interview and I want you to be a part of the panel discussion, and you say no, that might hurt me. It might hurt my feelings. I was excited about having you as part of the discussion. I was looking forward to, the camaraderie and the energy. It hurt me, but I gotta ask, did you intend to harm me?
Okay. Yeah.
So, and I think we get that confused a lot of times when we're talking about boundaries, and we say we don't want to hurt people's feelings, or we don't want to do anything to hurt them. When you reinforce your boundaries, people are going to feel hurt sometimes.
Absolutely.
But it's a question of, am I intending to harm you?
Right.
By establishing or reestablishing my boundary. So we gotta ask ourselves, how can we better evaluate if we're in the space to hurt somebody or harm somebody?
Wow. Man, wow. I would argue some people might think that this is splitting hairs, hurting, harming. But that I guess that the proposed I'm assuming what that means, because I don't think I've read the book yet. So you can be hurt, but not harmed.
Yeah.
But you can't be harmed and never hurt.
Yeah.
And this is me just kind of just thinking about it out loud and just really kind of, kind of work through this thing. Is it possible to, and we're talking here emotionally, talking about feelings, right? We're not talking about physical. I mean, if you have physically hurt somebody, then you've also harmed them. That's just the reality.
Yeah.
So obviously this would be, emotional, psychological. I guess what my thought process is, why would the person on the other end be hurt? And if they're continued to be hurt by your boundaries, then are they a fit, or are they aligned with being a friend? In other words,
that's good.
That's a
good question.
Can I have can I have too many boundaries, which causes hurt? Maybe not even just to one person. Maybe it's multiple people. Do I need to reevaluate? If you're talking about evaluation here, I need to reevaluate my own boundaries? Is there room for you to have maybe instead of having a boundary, you have up a wall? Listen, come on now. There's people that know how to stonewall, right? They just shut down all the way, right? So I'm really just trying to think of, where is the boundary to having boundaries? I couldn't help but go meta. I couldn't help it.
You went meta.
I did.
So let's put the 5 laws back up. And one of the laws that we talked about, number 5 is the law of motivation. And remember, the law of motivation is, what's the reason for the boundary?
Okay.
Like, check your motives at the door. Am I setting up this boundary because I'm concerned about, my livelihood and the livelihood of other people, or am I leveraging a boundary to take advantage of people? And we all know, or we've been around people who set up boundaries, and Pastor D. Rich says walls are boundaries, who set up boundaries for the sole purpose of taking advantage of other people. Not necessarily for the protection, and even the law of respect, number 4. If I'm establishing a boundary and I want you to respect my boundary, but you don't respect, but I don't respect yours. I gotta like you were saying, we should be evaluating the relationship, the friendship, because if it's one-sided, we know it's a problem. And I know so many of us who are watching us live or watching the replay, we have been there before, where we have allowed people to cross our boundaries while keeping their boundaries intact.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to take some comment as we're looking at this. If you're just stopping the scroll, we're talking about the book Boundaries by Cloud and Townsend. We went through laws 1 through 5 in our discussion last week, and then this week we're continuing with 6 through 10. And law number 6 is the law of evaluation. And we got some comments that we need to take here.
Yeah, I'm liking these comments.
Yeah, so let's take Aaron's.
Aaron says, these first 5 laws covered so many of the issues that my brother and I had. We were watching it together, and a lot was addressed without us even talking about it. Wow. God and his timing are amazing. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. You know, yeah, like I said, number 3 was the one that really hit me. So, you know, quick story. I have, or potentially will have, an opportunity. We talked about this earlier last week, Pierre, and you just sent me one meme, and I was just like, yeah, that sounds like the law of, the law of power. You know, where it would force me to have to dig into my past and have to explain things before I actually work with that person on a professional level. And I was like, man, I don't want to have to do that. Like, what's in the past is in the past. And now you got somebody new who's not even in the sense connected to you, but is connected to a world that you're trying to go, you know, trying to leave behind. But there's inevitably going to be questions, especially when, you know, contracts, money and stuff is involved. They're like, listen, my name is on this thing, so I got to make sure that we all good in this thing. And I remember coming to you and you're just like, you really don't have to work with anybody that you want to work with. I'm like, law of power. I have the control. So yeah, so I resonate, Aaron. Yeah, this week was also a week where, yeah, this was conversations applied.
Yeah. You know, Auntie Monica talks about the delineation between hurt and harm. And you know, Pam is wrestling with, you know, this point, intention. What's the intention behind our actions? Yeah. Joe brings up this point. You can harm someone as a result of not wanting to hurt them.
Ooh. G Money, you say that thing, man. Say that thing.
Listen.
Wow. I think of David and Absalom.
Yeah. And
mercy without justice is not love, but sorry. Ooh, we should. Well, that's not love either. Justice without mercy, but then mercy without justice is enablement, which in the long run, does harm.
Ends up right, because how you know, we've had friends in the past. We went to school together. We were in college at the same time, and we've had some of these conversations, and even with family, you know, something in your family is not right. Somebody's behavior, somebody's choices, something is just off, right? And then you say, man, I want to talk to him about it, but I know if I talk to him about it, I'm going to hurt their feelings, or they're going to be defensive, or you know,
friendship,
or going to hurt their friendship, right? And then ultimately, because of refusing to have certain conversations, like Gerald says, we end up harming them because the uncomfortable word of caution, or even rebuke or correction, or like, listen, what you doing? What's going on? That uncomfortable part, we're not willing to have it, and we don't want them to feel uncomfortable and get their feelings hurt. In the long run, ends up harming them.
Yeah. We've had many an intervention at the expense, right? Like, feelings have gotten hurt, but in the long run, it's like, man, you know what? I appreciate the fact that y'all just decided to show up, roll up. And so
absolutely. Man, what do we? Okay,
D Rich. Oh, okay.
I'll take D Rich.
Okay,
which one? Let's take
walls. Okay, boundaries tells me where my responsibility starts and ends, and where yours begins. Yes, but it tells me where mine starts and ends, but it tells you where yours begins, right? Does that make sense? Because I may not know what your boundaries are, but you definitely gonna know where mine are. I don't know. Maybe we're saying the same. We're probably saying the same thing. We're probably saying the same thing, D. Rich. I was just thinking though, just from the perspective of it is not. Oh, I say this carefully. It is not my primary job to understand your. No, sorry, not to understand. To identify your boundaries.
Oh.
That's not my primary. My primary job is not to try to, guys. I haven't read the book, so please.
Yeah. No, you're going
now,
well.
I should understand and empathize with what they are, but I'll give you a great example. Great example. I can just tell. I'm just in a business mode this week, so I know how much I'm worth when it's time to do. Let's just say to do consulting. I know how much I'm worth. I know how much I'm worth per hour. I know how much I'm worth per project. But when it's time for me to subcontract somebody else to do some work that I can't do, if they put on their profile and they say I'm willing to do the same exact job that I can do for a quarter of the price, I'm gonna go ahead and book them. So if I'm doing something for $1,000. And they're like, I could do the same thing for $25. Please don't do the math because me and math don't just roll with me here.
We did liberal arts. Wait, don't you got an MBA?
Pretty sure I know. Hey, don't do that.
Okay,
250 then. If we want to go there, it's 250. Oh gosh. So I do the same. I do the same thing for $1,000. They doing it for 250. And I go ahead and say, okay, cool. It is not my job to try to speak into them. This is their business now. They're running their business. It is not my job to say, yo, hold on. You are doing a great job. As a matter of fact, you're doing a better job than I'm doing. And I'm hiring you to do the same thing. Why don't you increase your price? That's not my job. That ain't my job. Now, mind you, we're talking from a business standpoint. Now, if I was a friend, right, maybe we would have that conversation, but it is not my role to try to make you level up so that now in business, I would be losing more, not even making any, because I know what I'm worth and who I can go to, who in the moment or in the season don't know their worth yet. So let's go ahead. This is how business works. Let's go ahead and start to use the individuals who may not have fully realized that what they're doing is what, because here's what's going to happen. There's going to come a point in time when they realize it and they say, yo, Chris, this was good.
Boundary.
And you know what I'm going to do? Good job. I wish you well. So anyway, all of that to say that it's not my primary role. Now, obviously, that's just from a business standpoint. So let's kind of bring it back to now more family, friends.
Listen,
it's still not my job.
Law number seven. Nope. Matter of fact, nope. I ain't gonna do law number 7 because you're touching it, but we got to get some of these comments that are coming in. But you are talking specifically about law number 7. I know you haven't read the book. I have. Some of us in the community have. But I just love the seamlessness of it because I'm not even gonna do law number 7 yet. All right, so Auntie Monica says, I have a QAnon friend that told me I betrayed him after I told him I no longer wanted to receive his text. Boundary. I told him he need to respect my boundaries once I asked him to no longer send it to me. We can talk about anything, but I don't want to hear anything about that specific topic anymore. I hurt his feelings, I guess, but it was definitely worth it. I would never want to harm him. Auntie Monica, like you releasing some of us, right? Because some of us need to tell people, I don't really want to talk about that anymore. And discernment, right? If it's avoidance of a topic, no, this is something we need to discuss in the context of our relationship versus, no, I don't want to talk about that topic. This theory, or every time we get on the phone, all you want to do is talk about the economy. I don't want to talk about the economy in the context of our relationship, our friendship. I don't want to talk about that anymore. I want to talk about something else. Hey, and navigating that difficult conversation. Like, I don't want no more QAnon texts. I don't want no more conspiracy theory texts or emails or take me off the listserv. I don't. I'll still talk to you. We'll still hang out, but we're not doing this no more.
Stop getting close to people that are frustrating you with their level of boundaries. You know what I realized? I had a hard time when I was close to individuals who, I'm that person, let's dig in, let's press into it. And they're like, nah, I'm good. And it'll be days. I'm like, we don't want to address this issue. Why am I tethering myself to individuals who probably need more time to process versus those who don't? Listen, everybody processes differently, but processing is a form of boundary. And what I had to learn is right. So what I had to learn is if that is the way that I operate, the problem solver. And if for me, some of those things are both urgent and important, that's another thing too. You need to understand and start to categorize and prioritize what's what. Y'all go look up the important, urgent matrix on your own time and then just look at framing some of the stuff that you think you need to be pressing people about, where they're like, listen, that's not that deep. I had to learn that if I'm continually tethering, maybe tethering is not the word, but trying to build close, intimate relationships. I'm not just talking about dating. I'm just saying, close relationships with individual who needs more time than for me. It's kind of like, it's not really working. Then it's incumbent upon me to respect that boundary and to back off from the relationship in general. Like I have to create the space, because what's going to happen is you'll get frustrated every time that you're trying to meet a challenge or meet a problem or answer or solve something. They're like, not right now. I'm good. And I think that it's like one of these, it's like an opposites attract kind of a thing for a lot of us, where we kind of just inevitably draw towards that kind of thing. And then, the very same thing that we're drawn towards is the very same thing that frustrates us. Okay, I'm done. Let's pick up some more comments.
No, listen. D. Rich says, to your point, I may not be fully aware where yours begins, but boundaries let me know yours don't begin in my space.
Yeah.
It's like we live next door to each other and I put a fence around the boundary of my yard. You and I will know yours does not begin in my yard.
Right.
So I don't know where your boundary begins. Right. I just know it doesn't begin here. So Rose, you have a question and I want to bring it up, but I want to wait. Because it's a powerful question. It's going to take us really deep, and I know there's going to be a lot of response. So before I pull that question on the screen, Chris, don't let me forget. I know there's already responses coming in. I want to wrestle with it, but I want to get through a couple of more of these. So law number 7, let me see if I can find it on the screen here. Law number 7 is the law of proactivity. And the law of proactivity says that it's a major challenge if people only know our boundaries in response to theirs, or in response to their actions or assertions or questions or demands of us, as opposed to leading with where our boundaries are. And it talks about in under this law where a person who has just complied forever, just go along, allow people to push their boundaries, cross their boundaries, do whatever they want forever, until one day where they just blow up. And the proactive person kind of lets you know up front. Yeah. Like, this is where I stand. This is what I'm going to take. This is what I want. This is what I'm interested in. Yeah. Instead of always reacting to when someone crosses your boundary, it's being a bit more proactive about speaking up and letting people know where your boundaries are. And like we were saying last week, this is tough in the context of this book is written from a particular socioeconomic ethnic perspective, right? Yep. It's written by two upper middle class psychologists, right? Two upper middle class white psychologists. And one of the things that we wrestled with last week is that some of the nuances that we deal with different socioeconomic statuses and backgrounds. How do we wrestle with that in the context of how you've been raised and the questions that you could ask and this stuff? Because some of us come from family systems where it's like, what do you mean boundary? You don't have a boundary until I tell you you have a boundary. And even speaking up, if if I speak up and tell someone, particularly who may be older than me in my family, that something is not okay with me, sometimes the response can be, you're being disrespectful.
Hey, I went to the postal office. There was this lady who was serving. First of all, I commend postal workers in this time, as challenging as it is. But this particular office that's the closest to me, Lord, please just bless 441 and all of the businesses because they need it. Sometimes anyway, so there's only one person in the postal office. There's only 5 people that are allowed at a time. There's only one person handling the mail. One person. So I'm in there and I'm prepared to be in there for an hour. I end up going in there and I'm like, wow, she's educating people while she's also taking care of the mail. I'm like, oh, she's superb. 36 years in this thing. She's about to retire. All right, cool. I go up, and as I'm talking to her and asking her questions, she's, older Black lady, probably maybe in her 50s, 60s, very sassy, but it's the responses that she's giving is because it's like there's an audience also behind her. And I realize it as I'm talking, because I really just want to understand certain things, because I've been hearing all kinds of different instructions. So now she's telling me something different. And I'm like, oh, hold on, wait a minute. You mean that I can do da-da-da? And it's like the way that she says it back to me, it's as if I was choosing not to listen to her versus me reinterpreting what she said so that I can know this for the next time. And long story short, man, I was just, I felt almost kind of like not embarrassed, but like, yo, you trying to clown me. Like, but here's the thing. Instead of me being the vocal, like, yo, hold on, bro, this ain't, we ain't like, can you treat me with a little bit more respect? Like, don't treat me as, my voice got quieter. And I'm like, this is somebody who's older than me. Now, mind you, when I left the office, I was like, yo, how could, but when I was in there, inside there, I was just like, to the point where she was like, yo, you're going to have to speak up. And I realized, wow, like my whole self, like the inner me, the inner child in me just kind of came up, was like, okay, let me, I understand. So that was number one, because she's older. Number two, your package is, my life is in your hands right now. I need to make sure that I do everything right, because when I leave, mistakes happen. And I don't want mistakes happen on the account of you feeling like I was disrespectful to you when you was the other way around. Anyway, I say all of that to say that, long story short, from a different socioeconomic, cultural perspective, I had a right. That was law number 3 again, man. Law number 3 is to be able to be like, whoa, hold on, wait a minute. Whoa. Like, I get you're doing your job. I get it's high stress, but can we just have a professional conversation here? We don't need the back and forth and the antics. I'm good with that. I didn't do that. I soaked it all in and let her just walk right through my boundary. She was like, please put your card in there. And I asked, because, most times now things are swapped out. I was like, well, am I able to use my phone? She said, please use your card. And the way that she was doing it, I was like, okay. All right. Okay. Yep. Okay. So anyway, that being said, it was tough. It's tough when you know what your boundaries are and you're choosing. And listen, I'm saying this for a lot of us in our Black culture. You're choosing to allow your boundary to be encroached or just straight up just broken because of respect for the elders or those who are older. Because there's so many different factors. Because let's bring it to like a higher authoritative. Like, I'm gonna allow my boundaries to be broken because if not, I just might die. Let's be real. There's some stuff that I would be willing to do, even though I might have a right. If I get pulled over, you know what? All rights out the window, because at this point, I just want to preserve my life. Go ahead and break the boundaries. Like, these are so you're right. And the reason why I went on this long thing is because I want us to understand this is, for me, this was real life. This was in real time. This was yesterday. And it wasn't even with another white authority. This was another Black woman who we should be able to have some kind of agreement. But you're in a position of power that allows you in this moment. Your say-so matters. How you handle my package matters. So I almost have to kind of pull my boundary back a little bit so that I can just let you do what you want to do and say how you feel, because I understand it's a high stress situation, but at the same time, it doesn't give you it's not a reason to break my boundaries so that you can keep yourself, sane. Anyway, all of that to say, yeah,
I think this
it's
is
different from white folk and black folk. I'm just gonna say it's different.
No, it's good. And then, I mean, if we want to nuance it even more, because we're having this conversation, it's different for males and females, man.
Because you know what? There maybe have people in the same line who may not have seen anything different with that transaction.
There's some things flat out as a male I could say. Colleen and I were having this conversation. Let's take a sports commentator, Stephen A. Smith. You guys don't know anything about Stephen A. Smith. He is a popular sports commentator on ESPN, the ESPN network.
He should be a preacher. I'm just saying.
I don't know if his caricature, because there's a lot of acting that goes into sports entertainment. His caricature, his bravado. He speaks with a chip on his shoulder, and sometimes even a sense of arrogance. And you can tell it's played up.
Yeah.
Somewhat. I don't really know Stephen A. Smith, so I'm just going by what I see on the television screen. But then, let's ask the question: if you saw a female sports commentator that elicited the same, that demonstrated in the same way,
same kind of alpha personality,
what would we say about her? What would be the language surrounding how we reference each other? So even as two males talking about boundaries, because who was saying it before? Let me scroll up. It was a comment about privilege. D-Rich, the author's perspectives are also filtered through their privilege.
Absolutely.
The reality that as two Black males talking about boundaries, and we are even trying to discuss the vantage point and perspective of the two white male authors, we as two Black males are speaking at a place of privilege, because we can, even the way that we carry ourselves on this platform, if you saw two females doing the same thing, you may say certain things about them, right?
Yeah.
And going back to your point before, when we look at this law of proactivity, law number 7, where is the privilege that we say in that? Because who is allowed to be proactive about saying, these are my boundaries, these are my standards, these are my limitations, don't cross. In our culture and society, who do we give the green light to proactively communicate their boundaries, and who do we say, nah, for the sake of my package getting from one place to another, your boundaries don't matter right now?
Hey, can I say something? So just from a cultural perspective, and just I can only speak in the proximity of my neighborhood. When you go to service-oriented businesses, the customer's boundaries don't matter. The customer ain't right. There's a chip on the worker's shoulders, and it's like, what you want? No, we don't.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Right? Like that. And it's almost as if you are, if this is how you are raised or how you're looking, when you're younger, what you're experiencing, you get to a certain age where you realize there are particular contexts that I go into where I have to put my boundaries at the door. And I am
case in point.
Yeah.
When you go to a Jamaican restaurant,
we not abdat.
Put your boundary. If you go to a Jamaican restaurant,
and I'm Jamaican, so I can co-sign.
You're Jamaican,
Yeah, and so here it is, where if from a contextual, like if there are places that I just psychologically say, okay, I'm entering into this space, I'm going to put my boundaries to the side, because for the sake of just getting the thing that I need to get, or for the sake of them doing the thing right, I'm just going to go ahead and put my stuff back. White folk don't act like that. Let's be real. I'm going to pick my business. Will go elsewhere. So once again, there is this, and it's more. I love the book. I got to read the book to love it, right? And
Yeah.
The paradox of the book is that boundaries is supposed to be clear, black and white.
Yes,
How do we, and this is a rhetorical question, but how do we, especially as African Americans, create clear-cut black and white boundaries in our great context of systemic racism, oppression, even to each other? For us to be like, even okay, it's great, but I'm gonna be like, this is the boundary, man. It can create, and I'm remembering Rose's question for the end.
We got to come back to that.
Yeah, it can create more complexities because it's like, oh, so you're gonna put a boundary here, but you ain't putting a boundary there. Oh, so your girl can't talk to you that way, but an old male woman could talk to you any which way, and you just gonna go ahead and get clowned in front of the how you. Listen, like, so then it's the question of like consistency. So I love this law because at the end of the day, being proactive also means that you have to be consistent on all fronts. The problem is, and here's my problem, P, with this. When you become consistent on all fronts and you start hurting people around you because you decide to level up your boundaries, you decide to level up your expectations, and if you start to be seen as better than, or you start seen as that ain't oh, you new now, and you're like, yeah, as a matter of fact, I am. What do you do?
That is, man, I think you dipping into Rose's question. We got to hold off just a little bit, because I think that's what challenges a lot of us. Man, I keep coming back to the I am Sam argument, man. Some of us are just like, I won't. Our Worship and Word family, love to hear from you on this perspective. There are a lot of us who will not create the boundary and level up, make the change, make the shift, because we know it's going to lead to uncomfortable conversations with the people who are closest to us. What do you mean you don't do that no more? We did this for 25 years. What you mean? Are you better than I am now? And then the boundary gets crossed because people ask, okay, so to demonstrate that you don't think you're better than me, I need you to do what we used to do.
Let me tell you, Monica put certain restaurants will carry you in a minute and then still know you'll come back the next day.
I think that's people know.
And that's the problem. And that's
when people know that you're coming back.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever dealt with a gaslighter, Pierre, but
gaslighter.
Like as long as there's oxygen, they can light a fire.
Yeah.
Who's the oxygen? You.
Yeah. You keep breathing on it.
You. And they know. And I think that whether if it's restaurants or whether if it's people with toxic behaviors, the whole point is if you continue to come back to it, that's a boundary. As a matter of fact, I will say you just showing up without even saying a word is breaching a boundary. Sometimes you don't even have to just show up and tell somebody about your boundary. Hit the block button. It's boundary enough for some of y'all. Somebody can hit the block button right now.
Listen.
Listen, sometimes you don't have to have an explanation for your new boundaries. You know how many people I got blocked?
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Listen, Lord, but hey, I say this because depending on where you're coming from, listen, depending on the life that you've had, why you think kryptonite was such a toxic thing for Superman? Kryptonite was from his old home. I love using that analogy, right? Kryptonite did not become kryptonite until he left Krypton. Well, he didn't leave, he got shipped off. But the whole point is that's what happens. It's the stuff, and usually, and a lot of times, it's the stuff from the past, it's the stuff from the old you that is going to come back and really, honestly, just test to see, is you new? Like you knew or not?
Is this boundary for real?
Yeah. Babies do it all the time.
All the time.
You're like, oh, no, babies don't know. That's because you had no kids yet. Now, I didn't have no kids yet, but I'm close enough, right? To know, like, oh, yeah.
I mean, you got nieces and nephews.
Yes, in here. And they be looking at you too, like, he for real or nah? Yeah, nigga, I'm for real. Come here. Come get this. So anyway, the point is this. If even down to an infant, they can push your boundaries as an adult. Just imagine Ellipsis. Okay.
And one of the things in church spaces, in our families, and then in our spiritual families, in our churches, we don't have these conversations.
We don't.
We don't have them.
We put boundaries around talking about boundaries.
We put boundaries around talking about boundaries.
So is that a boundary? If boundaries harm, is it a boundary?
Ooh.
Or is it a barbed wire fence? Well, that's still technically a boundary.
Well, I think it's a conversation around healthy boundaries.
Oh, you know what? I'm glad. Okay. I'm glad you said that. So what we are advocating, guys, we're advocating for healthy boundaries last week and this week. Just don't start putting up fences with barbed wire and explosive mines around you. Don't IED people now.
Yeah.
Putting up healthy boundaries that is supposed to benefit you and the other person. You may not see that yet, but when I'm thinking about last night's sermon, the famine to an extent, it might be a little stretch, but it was a kind of boundary, right? And with that, the other end of that thing turned out to be reconciliation for the family. So your boundary should not just benefit you. Should also benefit the residual outcome of your boundary should benefit other people. Do not create the boundary because you're trying to protect somebody else. I'm going to say, put your mask on first. Too oftentimes we try to build fences around people and relationships, and then it's like we are still exposed in the open, and then we get hurt and upset when we try to enter somebody else's boundary that we helped them build, and like, I'm not on that no more. Build your own boundary.
Which brings us to law number 8.
We just swinging right into it.
The law of envy. And here's the argument from the law of envy. Boundaryless people feel empty and unfulfilled. They look at another's sense of fullness and feel envious. This time and energy needs to be spent taking on responsibility for their lack and doing something about it. I think that goes right to what you were saying. There are times when we are so intent, and we see this all the time. Movies do a good job of playing up this story so well. And the story is, I'm the friend that helps you get your life together. And then when you get your life together, I realize I did not put that same intention into getting my life together. And now I'm envious of the new place where your life is, because I spent all of my time helping you get your life and your family, your job and your career and everything together. But now I didn't put any of that in my direction. And now I feel some type of way about you. I know we don't use the phrase some type of way here on Worship and Word. We use the color wheel, the emotional color wheel, and pull that up. But we've seen it, right? It's a common narrative in movies.
Yeah.
Oh man, I forgot to put. I'm gonna put it up. I'm gonna put it up. Law of envy.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. You know, the times that I get, and you're so right. I think the times that I've gotten, maybe envious is a strong word. I'm really trying to think about envy in the context of boundaries. That might be a little bit meta. Where we're talking about the law of envy, dealing with the boundaries as opposed to envy in other capacities and things. But for me, let's use the word envy, but it might also kind of be okay, let's go with envy. I don't know if that's the right, but where there are boundaries that I should have had. Let's go there. Hey, let's go there. So let's talk about past relationships, boundaries that I should have had or held in the relationship. And then the person on the other end starts to have the boundaries that my intent was to have when we were in a friendship, dating, whatever. And then for me, that ends up making me look like I don't got it together, or I'm a hypocrite, which is really good. Or right, like, or I'm not as mature, and I'm like, what am I really envious? What am I really envious or upset about? The fact that they decided to have the boundary and I didn't, or the fact that they decided to get it together before I did, which now makes me look like I'm not mature enough to uphold particular boundaries consistently. Listen, I want to free somebody with this whole thing of envy. If you are from the perspective that I'm talking about, if you find yourself being upset or frustrated, or maybe even envious for people who have, let's use the word leveled up, their expectations have improved or increased, or whatever the case is, and they might not have even told you. That's the part that probably is the hardest part, where you are in close friendships. You're probably dating somebody. You might even be married, and they have decided to improve or increase or level up expectations without you having known it. And now you are kind of, in a sense, on the other end of that, because now it feels as if you haven't met, or you aren't meeting their caliber of whatever, because of the boundaries that they now have created. And it's like, you don't make the cut. Man, even in marriage that happens. I'm not married, but like, even in marriage that happens is
it does.
I would suggest that instead of continually focusing on why now, or why didn't they let me know, or that's a rabbit hole trap. You'll never probably know. They may not even fully understand themselves unless, y'all go to therapy. My suggestion would be read the book. Okay, that sounds so trite. My suggestion would be, it does sound trite. My question would be, or my suggestion would be, to ask yourself, well, what are my boundaries? It's almost as if you could remove yourself. Okay, that's there, because really boundaries is really just expectations. That's really what it is, right? So if you just remove yourself and say, okay, this individual or these people are now expecting or having these particular things set up. Well, what are mine? It removes you out of the middle. It puts the expectations in at the forefront, so that you can now start comparing. Now, the challenge is, if you have an individual, or if you have a circle of friends or whatever, where they're not willing to do that, and so you're kind of like left trying to do that for yourself, it's going to be very difficult to do that without having an open conversation. I think that's where we would have the challenge, right? Where if you can't have an open conversation of, okay, well, tell me what these are. Tell me, and here it is, guys. Oh man, this is what I had to learn. The why they decided to do it isn't even as important as to the fact that they have these boundaries now. Like, you would, if you're like me, you would want to know, like, but why now? Like, what happened? And why those things are important. It's not essential for you to respect and to understand this is where they are now. Okay, let's take some comments. Lana says, it's not my job to make you comfortable with my boundaries. My in all caps. It's real. If you're like me, you want to know why. You are that person. Strategy is all about not just the framework, but the rationale behind the framework. So what you start to do, I'm talking to people like me who are listening right now. What you start to do is you want to start to figure out the undergirding motivation. Law number 4, I think it was, right? Law number 5. What's the motive? What are you really trying to get at? Is there, something that I don't know? Like, what is it? Guys, even that is a boundary too. So at the end of the day, they may tell you, well, this is just where I'm at right now. And you have to be okay with that answer. For the longest, it's been so difficult for me for the longest to try to frame people as strategies to understand, and to every decision that's made, or I need to understand the deeper reasoning in the context so that I can now adopt and to respect your boundary, your expectations, because now I understand what you understand. Nah, bro. That's this. That ain't it.
And it's tough because for a lot of times, even if we got to the answer of why, it wouldn't satisfy us.
It wouldn't even make a difference. It is the original sin's context.
That's
how it is. Adam and Eve thought that there was more underneath understanding. If you can get over the more, if you can get over the there's got to be more to your story, because that's another thing too about storytelling, right?
Yep.
If you can get more to that, then you feel as if you will then fully understand. Now you will have you will free yourself from empathizing, and not just understanding, but empathizing other people's boundaries who are in your life, and also yourself, when you realize you don't have to have all of the answers in order to establish a boundary.
Yeah.
You would probably start setting boundaries easier and more quickly for yourself if you don't feel like for every time that I decide to set this up, I have to give a reason for the hope that is within me. Like, no,
that's
no,
different. That's different. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's different. That's different. Do you? It sounds so clear. Do you put the boundaries? And guess what? If you start to realize that around you, this is like, if you start to realize that around you, more people are getting harmed versus hurt, or maybe even both, then you can now start to reevaluate. Okay, what am I? Okay, multiple people are telling me that.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten different feedback from the move that I decided to make.
Yeah.
Then you can start to assess, but don't try to assess what other people are going to assess about you before you decide to assess your own boundaries. Just set the thing, and right. Yep. Especially as intellectuals, that's what we do. And I would also say that the reason why we're also conditioned to do that is because we don't come from a place of privilege. So we have to have, and this is for intellectuals, especially as African Americans, we have to have a solid reasoning as to why we're going to say, this is what I deserve, or this is what I expect, and I don't have to give you a reason for it. Because that was the world that we were brought up in.
So here's one of the discussion questions from the study guide. What is God calling you through this discussion to do about what you lack? More specifically, what questions would you do well to ask yourself instead of envying others? You referenced this specifically, Chris. Yeah. What's the question? What's going on with me? What are my boundaries?
Yeah.
And I know we can't cover all of this in an hour, but it's heavy when you listen, y'all. For some of us, this is the first time we even had this discussion or even listened in on a type of discussion like this. So we're a little bit, out of sorts, but that's why we're having it. That's why we're bringing it up. And when we talk about personal spirituality and faith, for some of us, we talked about rest before. Sometimes the most spiritual thing that you can do is take a nap. For many of us, the most spiritual thing that you can do is reassess what your boundaries are.
That's real.
If we don't have one, if we're just kind of floating through and taking everything as it comes, are we really exercising spiritual maturity? Which brings us to let's take us out. Let's take a couple of comments before. All right, let's go. Monica said, if I'm making life changes to be better for me, why do family and friends take it personally? My aunt said, well, you're eating something, when I reminded her that I no longer eat meat, which has been over 20 years now. Let me jump to the far end of this, right? Okay. The far end of this is now it is so like comfortable, easy, you're admonished when people make certain lifestyle changes. It's like so pop culture right now. Yeah. You go to you say you're vegetarian, you're vegan, whatever, right? You go to the store. It used to be only soy milk. Now we got almond milk. Now we got oat milk. Now we got this. Now we got that. Now we got stars. Now, it comes out people, Cicely Tyson, who passed recently. People are celebrating the fact that she was vegan for like 50 years. And this did that. It's like certain people, we look at their lifestyle and we celebrate it. We high five it. We're cool with it. I remember Steve Nash, the basketball player, was saying there was a section of time where he only ate fruit, only ate fruit in his playing career as he got older. Only ate fruit, nothing, no more. Like he only ate fruit. And you're looking at that and it's like, man, that's so cool. He only eats fruit. But then if you came and told me I only eat fruit, I'm gonna be like, Chris, what's wrong with you? What's your problem? That's weird.
You skinny as it is, bro. Like
bro, why are you doing that to yourself? What's going on? It's like like certain people can make certain decisions, and I think it's because they're far away from us. But when people are close to us, sometimes, and this is not all the time, sometimes when you make changes, whatever it could just be change, period.
Mm-hmm.
You making changes makes me uncomfortable because I consider, man, what are the changes I need to make?
And if that person isn't careful, they'll slip right into the MVPs.
Yeah. Yeah. D. Rich said, I got a friend who does not eat any fruit.
So, you go pray for your friend.
Yeah.
Pray for your friend, D. Rich. What to say?
I don't eat fruit.
Listen, yeah, it's Monica, it's
tough.
And you probably get the most of that also from family. She said 20 years she's made this lifestyle change, and they still. You know what I've learned also? This is not just with family; it's also with church folk too. And the reason why I say church folk is the week. It's like the weekend relationship that you have with church folk, not the ones
that's good. That's
that you
good.
with every day. I'm talking about the ones where they have nothing really else to say but to talk about how you look or what you're wearing.
Oh, you going there?
And but here's the thing. I empathize with them because they don't know any other way. If it's not the weather, it's going to be something about you for small talk. So when they see you, it's going to be how much you weigh, what you eat, what you didn't. And I empathize with it now because I began to realize, hold on, wait a minute. It wasn't just me that experienced that.
Mm-hmm.
Sister did. Other people that I know did. It's like that's the only thing that they were able to bring up because there was no other connection that they have. And so there's some people over 20 years, Monica, perhaps the 20 years is because that's maybe I could be wrong. I could be so wrong because I don't know your full context, but perhaps it could very well be that's the closest thing that she's got to try to have some sort of connection with, even try to have a conversation. Maybe not, but I'm just saying I've learned from my experience. I don't take those things personally anymore. When people are like, what are you eating? Because listen, if I would have put on another 30 pounds, let's say 50, because I am kind of, if I would have put on, you know what they would say? Oh, you can't win. You wouldn't win.
I can't win.
Which is why you need to set your own boundary. But D-Rich said they have no filter. It's true, they have no filter. Aaron says, I've had to adjust to new boundaries of several male family members. My family is really close and we talk about everything. Inevitably, when a male family member gets deeper into their relationships and gets married, things that used to be my business are no longer my business. It's their business. I get it now, but it was hard, or it was a hard adjustment the first time. Yo, that's real.
Yeah.
That's real.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, I don't know about you, but you know, when I've had individuals like actual like lady friends. I was gonna say girlfriends, but it might sound weird, but like girlfriends, like who are platonic friends who are women, who they started dating them. Like, you got to be like, it's different. So you just gotta.
It's different. Yeah.
And there's some people with a higher level of emotional intelligence, and I do believe that you can cultivate. I do believe that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's not something that's you have it or you don't. But I also would argue that those that have a very high level emotional intelligence have also been prone to be people pleasers. So for me, that was a thing where I would actually be more sensitive to understanding, okay, you're in a new dynamic. I want to make sure that dynamic, I'm not the person that's going to mess that up. So I'm more sensitive to that. So I resonate though with that, Aaron. For some of us, it can be hurtful, but not harmful to respect those boundaries. So very good.
Good tie back. Woo, man. All right. We got two logs to go, and we got to get to Rose's question. So we're going to try to move a little quicker, but the engagement, the conversation has been, man, just so great coming from the family, coming from the community. All right. Oh, yeah. So law number 9, man, I took the laws down. Law number 9 is lawless, the law of activity. So this is different from the law of proactivity. Because some people, they're like, didn't you have pro? Well, didn't you have this? So the proactivity is specifically with being proactive in sharing with people what your boundaries are.
Yeah.
Activity is specifically about, as a person with clear boundaries, what are the initiatives that you're taking in life? So one of the stories that they bring out or reference is the parable of the talents.
Okay.
And how being active within your framework or within your boundaries actually leads to growth and fulfillment. So you can't just say, okay, these are my boundaries and this is how I'm going to live my life, and not live your life and not move forward and not take initiative, because the boundaries are, the guidelines, the frameworks, the principles that you're choosing to live by. But what's so important for that is to actually do the living. And we can't just be like sitting in a box.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that it asks is, what initiatives are you taking right now? What specifically, as a result of this discussion, and what area of your life is God calling you to be more active? And when will you begin to knock, seek, and ask in response to God's call to be more active?
That's good. That's good.
Listen, I used to sing, right? Yeah. Choir in college and all that stuff, singing groups. And it just got to a point where I just stopped. Just stop. Law of activity. Just stop. Well, eventually, potential and past experiences don't matter if there is no corresponding present activity.
Run it back.
Potential and past experiences don't matter if there is no corresponding present activity. What are you doing right now?
Yep.
In response to the boundaries that you've established. D-Rich says boundaries, like walls and fences, require work to put up and maintenance to keep up.
That's right. To keep up.
And so we talked about at the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021, all these things that we believed God for our worship and word community. We believed God for each other. And I think it goes back to, I can't remember which particular law, but I am responsible to you. I'm not responsible for you. So a lot of us, man, we say so well, I believe God and I'm establishing these boundaries and this is how I'm going to live my life. And these are decisions I'm going to make, and I'm going to stop doing this. We are so good at talking about what we're going to stop doing. We are not so good at not just talking about what we're going to start doing, but actually doing it.
Yeah, that's the definition of hypocrisy. I would even suggest that you can't get to a place where God is going to start enlightening or challenging you to do certain things until you decide to establish what the boundary is. God, show me what to do. Start with what you start what you're not going to do. For the best way to create a boundary. The best way to create a boundary is, and it's so tough to say, but this is why I'll take this to my grave. I think this is why it was easy for God with the 10 commandments, because they were boundaries, guys, for them to be, a lot of them, the thou shalt nots.
Yeah.
Our problem, our human nature, from God's perspective. No, I don't know the mind of God, but we strive every day to have the heart of God, right? So from God's perspective, it is easier for human beings to do everything that is ungodly. So he put boundaries to constrain us for, okay, this is what you're not going to do. Does that make sense? Like there were spiritual laws in place because we just straight up would just do anything. So he's like, okay, because you have a propensity to do anything, the boundaries is going to curtail to what you shouldn't be doing. That's the boundary. So I would suggest,
I love this.
So I would suggest that if you are, and this is okay. This is contextualized based on where you are. So if you're in a place where you're not doing anything, then the boundary needs to be to do something up to a point. But boundaries in general, Boundaries in general is to prevent something from going over something. So looking at it from the lens of a negative, I will not do this. Start your boundaries with that. Don't go too deep. Don't try to figure out some fancy way. Just say, what are the top 3 things that you're not going to do? And you got your boundaries. I think that's probably the easiest way for people to start saying, okay, how should I set up my boundaries? Well, what don't you want to do? No. What maybe I should what don't you want to do? But what should I don't know, P, maybe you can help me with that, but it's easier to talk about what you shouldn't do as a boundary versus what you should do in the lens of activity.
Yeah. I think and Gerald's a basketball player, playing a lot of ball. So D Rich too, hoopers, right? Mm. A good place to draw this from is the sports world. It's a great place to draw this from. Mm. Athletes, if you take football, if you take basketball, if you take soccer, you take hockey, whatever the sport is, you take swimming, Olympic swimming. Athletes do not put the majority of their focus on where the boundary is. Okay. The boundary is there. It is a critical part of the game. Yeah. They know the penalty for stepping outside of the boundary. Oh, wow. They know where they're supposed to be. Wow. But what athletes do is put the majority of the focus on what they can do within the boundary. Right? So if you take Barry Sanders was my favorite football player growing up, arguably the best running back of all time, right? When you look at a football field with clear boundaries, if you step out of bounds, the play stops, right? Right. But Barry Sanders is known for doing unbelievable things within the boundaries of the game. I mean, when you look at the old clips, you're trying to figure out how does he avoid an entire team from tackling him? Yeah. How does he do that? Yeah. Well, he knows clearly what the boundaries are and has agreed to play by them. And because he knows where they are and has agreed to play by them and to allow them to be the really the limits of what he's playing, right? That's done. We don't need to keep rehearsing this and keep going over it because I know where the boundary is. I know where the limit is. I know where the standard is, and I'm okay with it. Now I'm going to hyper focus on what can I do within this. And Stephen Curry, Michael Jordan, whoever, Michael Phelps. I know the boundary.
So you mean to tell me? So you mean to tell me that Exodus 14 is about boundaries, but Romans 6 is about knowing that the boundaries are there, but you are no longer bound by the boundaries. They're there, but you're not going to play outside of the boundaries in order to win the game.
Look, Exodus 19 and Exodus 20, right? We're asking the wrong questions in the context of Exodus 19 and Exodus 20. The questions that we're asking with Exodus 20 is what can't we do?
Yeah. Right.
That ain't the right question. That's not the Gail Sayers question.
Right.
That's not the Michael Jordan question. That's not the Serena. That's not the Venus and Serena question. That's not the Tiger Woods question.
Yeah.
That's not the Hank Aaron question.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
The question is, what? Okay, this is where God has placed these limitations. Right. All right. Right. How do I max out what's inside the boundary?
Now, here's the question that I have, and I think I said Exodus 14. Yeah, Exodus 20. Sorry. But when you're a babe in this thing, boundaries matter more than what does it? Especially in athletics. Let's go there. Even then, is there more of an emphasis on staying within the boundaries to do certain things, like don't go beyond the half court when the ball is in play, because then it's going to be a backcourt violation and things like that. Where when now you're more mature in your season, like I know that stuff is there, but We in New Testament now. I could cross you up and do whatever I need to do, or I can run on the fringes of, the sidelines without crossing over, because I know where the boundaries are, but I don't have to focus on it. I'm wondering if we kind of just for a moment spiritualize this idea of setting boundaries. If the boundaries in the Old Testament, the core boundaries, the top 10, let's say, boundaries that are given, when you become mature in the faith, and maybe that's probably even a terrible way to say it, because the New Testament says that when Jesus died and rose again, and he is the fulfillment of those boundaries. Oh, help me, Holy Ghost. The boundaries are there, but those who are saved in Christ, they operate within the boundaries because the boundaries exist, but the boundaries is not the focus. I'm trying to connect the two together, right? But go ahead, tag in.
Here's the thing that is in both spaces, right? Mm-hmm. When we look at Exodus, and we're going to get to the last law, but as we look at, because law number 9 is the law of activity, and we're trying to wrestle with this, right? The 10 boundaries in Exodus 20, right? Mm-hmm. And then the fulfillment of the law. And we got to really be nuanced in how we talk about the fulfillment of the law, and that's a whole different discussion. But in both spaces, even if you go, let's go to the parable of the talents.
Let's do it.
Right? What is the boundary in the parable of the talents? The boundary in the parable of the talents is one of them got one. Mm-hmm. Mm. And the master was coming back for him to give an account. Uh-huh. Right?
Yeah.
And the master had high standards. That was it. What did he focus on? I had one.
Yeah, he had one, and
back.
Yeah.
The master had high standards.
Yeah.
That's all he focused on.
That's all he focused on. Yeah.
He did not focus on, okay, so in the light that I have one, in the light that the master's coming back, in the light that the master has high standards, what could I be doing right now?
With this one. Yeah. Ooh, okay.
Exodus 20.
Yeah.
Romans. Regardless of how we frame or where we put the law, how tall or how short we build the fence, if we're not asking what is it that we should be doing, as opposed to only focusing on where the boundary is, we've lost it.
How is it, P, that we can be boundary driven Christians, but we can't set up these same boundaries for our personal lives? It befuddles me. That we set up these boundaries, especially let's use 10 commandments, right? And especially for a lot of us, the fourth is the crux for a lot of us, right? Where
we do that side of the joint.
Hey, listen. Hey, listen. If y'all ain't saying Happy Sunday right now because the sun gone, then y'all need to give up this sunset.
Right, for real.
Hey, if y'all blowing and whistling and hollering when it's midnight, January 1st, then y'all just anyway. Because y'all gonna get them. But my thing is, though, how is it that we can extrapolate the concept of boundaries when it comes to religiosity, but then when it comes to relationships, we struggle with trying to establish these same personal boundaries for our lives?
Yeah.
Like, thou shalt not gossip is a boundary.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yep. Listen, y'all. Oh, man.
Don't forget Rose question. Right. Don't forget Rose question.
I'm gonna go. No, we're gonna do 10. We're gonna do 10, and then we're gonna do Rose question, and then we're gonna get out of here. D Rich says, listen, we're even reading the boundaries in Exodus 20 the wrong way. Oh man, it did. Lana says, either way, the disparities that we have, ethnic, cultural, economic, will impact how you see or act within the boundaries or moving beyond the boundaries. But either way, it requires you to be active. Either way. Law of activity.
We love the boundaries that cause us not to do nothing.
We worship the boundary. Ooh, see, nope, you're not gonna get me in another discussion.
Y'all let us have it. Hey, let's call it what it is.
You love the boundaries.
I said, I said this earlier today. I said God would rather some of y'all go to work on Sabbath versus taking off that time to go ahead and gossip in church. Like, let's go ahead. Go ahead and be productive.
You might as well.
Go ahead and be active. Well. Do some good. Do some good in the workplace. Like, come on. Anyway, I'm done.
Oh man. Okay. So 10, law of exposure. And really, it's a question. I won't dig super deep into the law of exposure, but I'll ask the question. And the question is, what part of you are you hiding from other people? Because you don't want to deal with the consequences of people knowing your boundary.
Oh wow! So in other words, articulating your boundary will also tell on yourself. And so if you don't articulate your boundary, then you're breaking the law of exposure, because you don't want people to know that you don't drink because you. Hey, no shots to people that don't like. I was just using
the law of exposure says that your boundaries need to be made visible to others and communicated to them in relationships, because we do not exist in a vacuum.
Ooh, hold on, wait. Oh, P, this works both ways now, though. In relationships, that means that I'm not going to go ahead and parade my boundaries to somebody that I don't have a relationship with. In other words, I shouldn't be overexposing, indecently exposing myself to folk who never asked for the exposure.
Listen, social penetration theory, if I just met you, I don't tell you everything about me.
That's real.
Matter of fact, when we
law of reciprocity,
when you look at the scriptural narrative, there are things, if you take just the Gospels, there are things that Jesus did not reveal to his disciples until the relationship had reached a certain depth. Certain insight they just did not get. The 12 got a different insight. Peter, James, and John got a different insight than the 12, who got a different insight than the 70, who got a different insight than the 120. Because of the difference in the depth of the relationship. So there are some things that should not be communicated because of the context of the relationship. Right. But then there are some things, because of the context of the relationship, that most definitely need to be communicated. And when we don't expose them because of, the social fallout or, feeling uncomfortable, we're putting ourselves and the other person at a disadvantage. For case in point, Abraham and Sarah. Why didn't you tell me, bro? You said that was your sister. Technical language, they're related. Technical language.
Right.
Bro, that's your wife.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hey, listen. Hey. So can we talk about this? So Lana said I don't expose my personal finances. So I came across something on Facebook. I think there's this 5-part series where there's this guy who is giving this. I think it's like a mixture of like a group of guys, a group of ladies that they come together and they kind of talk about relationship stuff. And so he is bringing up the story. Some of y'all might have seen this as well. I think his name is Anthony O'Neill. I think, and he was talking about this. This experience. Like episode 3. They're like 5 parts of this thing. I just saw the third one. I was like, oh, this is a very good question. So anyway, he goes on this date, and I guess the date went well. And then the woman texts him, I guess later that week, whatever the case was. Hey, the next time we go out, I think this was their first date, by the way. Hey, the next time we go out, can we go to this particular restaurant? And he texts back. I'm probably going to mess this up, but he said that, that's not in my budget. However, if we continue dating, then that's something that we can do. And he said that she never responded back to him until one day she saw him on an international platform, and then she reached out. The pettiness of, I guess, the thing on both sides was they both have iPhones. So as he's texting, he saw the 3 bubbles after he gave his answer to her, like, hey, listen, this ain't in my budget, but da-da-da-da. And then he saw the bubble stop.
She was about to type something. She was typing and she deleted it.
And so when she then reached out to him, he said he did the same exact thing. It's like, hey, how you doing? He started typing it. He just stopped. But all of that to say, the core of the back and forth started to become, was it really that she was offended by the fact that he said, that's not in my budget? Or the idea that if we continue to date, then it might be, you might be worthy of being taken on, this thing. So when I read Monica's thing, the reason why, or Lana's comment, is because it may not be oftentimes the boundary that you have set up that exposes perhaps, the framework that you have for, even in a dating context, how much you're willing to spend on it. It's probably not even an issue. The problem that the ladies had was, why are you going into the whole, well, if you continue to, then we might be able to, and they're like, you have to do all of that. She probably would have respected you on the fact of, you just
stop right there.
Right, with your boundaries. I was like, okay. And how many times though do we do that? Especially, and I think that the way that we operate as men versus women too makes a difference. A lot of us are very like problem solving, clear cut. Like, this is what it is. It's not my budget. I'm good. Let me fit you in a line item. Like, one of the women felt that way. Like, I felt like a line item reading that message. So I think it's also the fact of being able to communicate our boundaries. This might sound cliche, guys, but within relationship, from a loving perspective, because I can articulate the same boundary to one person in a negative way to another person, and I have exposed myself as someone who's loving here versus someone who's judgmental here, and it's the same exact boundary. And I think that how you convey your boundaries will expose you to the kind of person people see you to be in character. I think it makes a difference. So it's not even, as you were saying, Pierre, it's not even about whether it's a good boundary or a bad boundary. Sometimes they're good boundaries if they're articulated the wrong way. Exposes you in a whole different light.
Listen, man. All right, yo, it's been $1:30 in that we've been in. We got chill. We got chill. We got to stop. Let's do this for a little bit before we cut off for this evening. I know, man. There's so many notes that we could type and go through. So many comments. Love seeing your comments, your conversations back and forth, and what you shared and contributed to this conversation. It's been really, really awesome, y'all. Really, really awesome. Here, we got to do Rose. I was trying to find it. What Rose said.
She said, "Is it too late to create boundaries?"
Yeah. So let's wrestle with that for just a couple of minutes. Before we, there we go. Got it. Yep. Is it ever too late to set boundaries? So, man, how we feel about this particular question? Is it ever too late to set up boundaries? I know this is a doozy because some of us are we're thinking through relationships. We're thinking through, if you're an older parent, you're thinking about children. It's a lot that's going. You're thinking about your marriage. You're thinking about your job, your friendships. Yeah. Have I passed the point where I can communicate, or I should communicate, I don't rock with that, or that's not something I do, or I'm willing to do this. Here's what I submit. Or is it just like, man, listen, we done. Like, too much time has passed. It is what it is. Yeah. Now, I have my opinion. Yeah. Chris, I know you have your opinion. But I'd love to hear. I think, let me scroll back. Gerald says, if not too late, definitely more difficult.
Yeah, he did say that.
Carmilla says, establish boundaries before it gets messy. So that preventative maintenance piece, that's so important. But as we're wrestling with Rose's question, what's everybody's perspective on this?
Pam said, Pam, you're touching on a nerve. She said, well, if you want to damage the relationship, it might be. And my question is, if you set it up and it gets damaged, was it damaged to begin with? Does setting up a boundary expose the level of toxicity or hurt that was probably operating the relationship to begin with?
It also makes me think of wrestling where the boundary needs to shift. So if I buy a piece of property, right? I think the fence piece that someone mentioned before, I think D Rich. If I buy a piece of property and this is the boundary of I walk my property line according to the map and whatever it is.
Yeah.
But then what if I buy the lot behind me? So because my property ownership has grown, the boundary of my property has now changed. And how do I communicate now that my territory has literally expanded? And it requires me now to draw new boundary lines that may upset the people who only know me for the context of the old boundary lines.
Yeah. but that, okay. It's challenging to kind of use that because from a spatial perspective, that would mean that you're also then encroaching on their boundary if your property lines are increasing. Does that make sense? Or in a sense, from a mathematical standpoint, that means that if yours is increasing, theirs is decreasing. And I think there's a perception that people may feel that way. Oh, so you just go ahead and you just going to expand, which means that I am now becoming more limited in how I can engage or what I can do with you. Yeah, to an extent. Yeah. Oh, to answer Rose's question, for me, it's not too late to say no. If I look at like the root of boundaries, like once again, if I look at the core, if I had to sum it up in one word, the word would be no. This is far enough. But then to what Pam was saying and to what Gerald was saying, that no is going to come with some complexities, because as firm as you now might be, or as maybe tender you might be with that no, you're no longer dealing with your psychological the agreement with yourself of what you're willing and not willing to deal with. You now have to, in a relationship, friend, spouse, whoever it is, you now have to deal with how they react to it. And I think this is where you can become a chronic boundary setter and not care what other people think. And I think that's dangerous. There are people who be like, oh no, I don't, go ahead and set your boundary right now. But if you're more mature, you'll also try to navigate through, okay, what does setting this boundary also mean for this other person, especially if we were kind of mutually rocking together in the same way. And I'm like, I'm no longer in that space. Listen, I told y'all, sometimes the easiest way to say no is to hit the block button. I say that in the most practical way, where sometimes your no is just you just not showing up anymore. Now I get it. I understand you may not have the ability to do that, but for a lot of us, if you don't know how to do it, your first instance is to remove yourself from the situation. That is a boundary. There's no other way for me to put that. Like, because for some of us, you trying to come up with an answer and don't deal with it then yet. Just remove yourself, and then you can kind of deal with that, because you don't even fully maybe understand or articulate why this is no longer a thing, as God is doing a work in you, or as you're now in a new circle of people or whatever it is, and of life, and you're just like, yeah, I'm not in the same space. Anyway, I'm gonna shut up. But yes, no, it is not too late. But to what Gerald said, it's gonna come with some complexities. I think of God and how he has chosen to remove Adam and Eve out of the garden, but also with the boundary that he set up, he also said, so there's some other things that are going to have to happen. Y'all going to have to cultivate your own food now. There's going to be some labor pain. Like, there's some other things that are going to happen, some complexities that are going to happen, which is also still for your good. I'm removing you from this thing. I'm creating a boundary, but I also now need to keep y'all productive, proactive, and busy, because if not, y'all gonna just lose out on the whole promise that I have set up for y'all on the other end of this thing. So I think that's the other thing too. Perhaps maybe taking a chapter from God's book. just saying, you just can't say no and just leave the person high and dry, especially if it was so intense and it's been for such a long time.
Yeah.
You might just have to, in a sense, and maybe not all the time, but I don't want to use the word negotiate, but also try to find a way that it just doesn't benefit you. But okay, I'm gonna shut up because it's tough. It's tough. It's complex. Tough. But yes, it is not.
And there are times, I done sweated out my t-shirt. The conversation's been so good. There are times where it's got to be a clean break. Yes. So the discernment, especially if it's a space where you are in danger, like physical danger, psychological danger, like.
Oh, so wait. So Pete, you're saying there's a difference between boundary and break, like breakage.
Sometimes the breakage is the boundary. Remember I can't remember which boundary we were talking about, but we were saying the boundary sometimes is limiting a person's access to you. Yeah. Like they're limiting the impact of their abusive, oppressive, restrictive behavior on you. Ooh. You set that boundary. So sometimes it's a clear break. Sometimes you're saying it's a negotiation. It's a coming to terms. Hey, we're shifting in this way and let's talk through it. But sometimes like guillotine, this joint done, I'm out.
Hey, listen, God does the same thing. He did the same thing with the adversary. You look in Job, he still has access to heaven, even in the midst of him starting to start a coup. The coup ain't happened yet. That's a whole nother Bible study. We got to talk about when did the war in heaven actually happen. Lord, that's a whole nother thing, because the way that we understand it is different from whoosh. We ain't gonna get into that. But God was like, oh, so he milling around stirring up. He ain't swipe out the 1/3 yet, but okay. And so even the enemy had access, the boundaries. He was able to say to the Lord, oh, I'm just roaming around, stomping around like I am the prince of this world.
I'm up in here.
Right. I'm out here. So that's in Job, right? Revelation, though. You don't even have to go to Revelation. Jesus is even talking about, I seen that man get struck down. He got cut and struck. And so even then you have God having boundaries for people, toxic individuals, a toxic person. And even then God was like, I'm not just going to kick him out. I'm going to kick out the rest of y'all that have now had this. And so even God himself has created boundaries to preserve the love and of his governing kingdom. Okay, so I'm just going to say, emulate how even God decided to do it. Emulate how Jesus also decided to do it. He had a traitor in his midst who had full access to him. So there may be even some people in your life, and you got to know this. You have to know the difference in how much you can take and what the threshold is. But there may be people in your life who is supposed to have a level of access still to you, because if they don't see it in you, they probably aren't going to change their lives. Don't cut off people too soon.
Delicate.
Discerning. It is. It's very delicate. Yeah. I think discerning is definitely the piece for that question. Is But anyway.
So let me give you this real quick. Let me give you this preacher story before we go. All right, Chris. So here's the preacher story. It goes like, there was this guy who used to go to church, and whenever he went to church, he would show up just messed up, dirty, messy. His family would always show up immaculately dressed. And this went on for a very long time. And then one day the members got upset. They were like, yo, you can't be coming to church dirty. Like, you got mud on your clothes. You look messy. Why are you coming to church like this? Your family comes to church so nice. So they called a meeting and was like, yo, pastor, you got to talk to him. We tired of this dude coming up into our church looking nasty and muddy and messy. And his family always comes immaculately dressed. So the pastor has a conversation with him. And the pastor's like, so what's the story? And the guy's like, well, we walk to church and we walk through town to get to church. Well, at least my family does. My family walks through town. I walk around the town. And sometimes I walk through the fields and it's muddy and it's dirty. And I get my clothes messed up. So by the time I get to church, you see me in a messed up condition. He says, why do you walk in the fields while your family walks through town? He says, real simple, pastor. I'm a recovering alcoholic. And if I walk through town, the smell.
Wow.
If I walk through town, the sight of it. If I walk through town, the sounds of hearing people in a bar or having a good time will draw me in, and I'll be caught up and I'll lose my fight with this thing. So I walk around the town through the field to get to church, and my family walks through the town. And the pastor was like, listen, dirty, stinky, messy, whatever you got to do to get here, get here.
Yeah.
And he said, they had a conversation about it in church. And he said, listen, it is not your job to justify the other person's boundary. It is your job to support them on their journey to being who God has called them to be. Man, I heard that story, maybe 10 years ago, and it always stuck with me.
Yeah.
I'll be careful how we judge the boundaries of other people. And we got to be careful of not setting radical enough boundaries for ourselves that sometimes we don't always have to explain.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes that law of exposure, we got to be careful, because I took a photography class back in the day where you had to go into a dark room. And sometimes what can damage a photo is overexposure. You gotta be real careful with our boundaries. Sometimes it's we don't have one, or we had one, and like D-Rich said, we haven't maintained it. Or maybe we've overexposed that thing to the point where it's of non-effect anymore. And sometimes our radical boundaries don't have to be explained, because even if we explained it, it wouldn't make sense to other people. And it ain't their boundary.
Yep.
So yeah, y'all, 2 weeks of this, man. Next time, possibly we might have to do like 10 weeks.
Just take one. Oh, that would be so good.
Yeah. So man, it's been real cool hanging out with y'all, even all the way from New Jersey. And listen, y'all, don't despise the day of small beginnings. All right. Yeah. I ain't got my microphone. I got one earbud in my ear. I don't have my nice camera, my nice desk with my colored lights in the background.
Listen.
I'm like, you just gotta go with what you got. Plus, I was too lazy to pack up all that stuff. Wasn't bringing that to New Jersey. Great.
Oh man. Oh wow. Yeah.
Yep. Can we have a part 3?
Hey,
we'll have a discussion this week. We'll see what that looks like, because we got some other parts of this to talk through. Yeah. You know what? I know we're on the spot. We're doing this live. You know what would be cool, Chris? Maybe to have a conversation with some members of our Worship and Word community. Maybe bring them on.
Bring them up. Okay. Yeah.
And have this a roundtable discussion around how we wrestle with some of these things. So if you're open to that, if you be open to that, hit us up in our DMs on Facebook. Yeah, on Facebook. If you're watching this on YouTube, go to worshipwordministry@gmail.com. That's worship word ministry, all one word, worshipwordministry@gmail.com. If you would be open to being on camera with us to talk about boundaries or any other topic. All right. So no pressure. Some of y'all like to lay in the cut, and that's cool.
Yeah.
But if you want to hop on maybe for a short time to talk about some things to share, let us know. Hit us up, DM us on Facebook, on the Worship and Word Facebook page, or worshipwordministry@gmail.com. All right.
Well, now that you are in the co-host number 1 seat, go ahead and tell the folk why this is not the primary.
Listen. All right. Listen, y'all. We had a great discussion, almost 2 hours today, and it has been revealed that, man, that's a lot we have to talk through, and it's so great to talk to in the comment section, and us in this space, even in the family that we're around as we're watching this video. But nothing takes the place of the conversation that you need to have with God, especially about your boundaries. So
go pray.
Y'all already know.
You already know.